Yeah, we authored these, this one, and these two gentlemen taught the class.
It's too low to the ground, yeah.
And we just wrote the forward to this one.
Oh, what a very nice. But the Oklahoma the book history.
Color guard, halt! Color guard, post the color. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color guard, reform. Color guard, return to post.
My name is Amy Sain. I'm the proud president of our Premont Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome everyone out today. It really did turn out to be a beautiful day despite the crazy weather we had last night. So I'm so glad everyone was here, able to make it safe out here today at the park. I have a special Mr. Commissioner, here he is, Commissioner Huicho Gonzalez. Please welcome our guest. Again, it's so wonderful to look out here in the park and see so many faces. That just means that we have beautiful support from our wonderful community. We'd like to thank all of our family, our friends, our visitors, our guests who traveled near, who traveled from far. We thank you all for joining us in this very special event today. If you'll please bow your heads, we'll begin with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us here today at this very special event. Bless everyone present here today, that each one of us may be able to share what he or she have for you, your glory and honor. Grant good health and safety to our loved ones left at home, and peace and goodwill to all men. May the various activities related to this event be a success through your intervention. We ask all of these in your name. Amen. Amen. Please give another round of applause for our Bishop Boy Scout troops, Mark Anthony and Matthew Corrales, Bishop Boy Scout Troop 53.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be with you today. In fact, at my age, I'm happy to be anywhere. I do want to thank my very good friend, Homero, for inviting me. Homero has a very big fault, however, as some of you may know. He tends to invite people to talk about things he has far more knowledge of himself. In fact, Homero has probably more history in his head than historians have written in the volumes of books they have put together on South Texas and brush country history. We are here today to talk about an important event in the county and in Civil War history, the battle or skirmish of Los Patricios on March the 13th, 1864. And we can thank Homero for locating the site of this momentous event some 4 miles west of where we stand and sit today. First, a very quick story. Some 40 years ago, while teaching in Laredo, I obtained a small grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to study the role of Tejanos in the Civil War. And I spent the entire summer, sometimes 8 to 5, working in Austin, and later wrote a book entitled Vaqueros in Blue and Gray. I think the book was well researched, but somewhat disjointed, although the book still sells 50, 100 copies a year. Anyway, one day I was working at the State Archives, only a stone's throw from the Capitol, and I asked one of the archivists if I could see the muster rolls of the Texas Union veterans that I had been studying for the last few days. As he receded into the stacks to retrieve the documents, a nice elderly lady who was doing some genealogical research in the archives on her family approached the table where I was sitting. I remember this incident as if it was yesterday. Isn't it amazing how as we grow old we can remember things perfectly that happened 40 years ago, 70 years ago, but we can't remember if we went to the bathroom yesterday. Anyway, young man, she said, politely in a very low voice, almost a whisper, could I have a word with you? Now remember, this was 40 years ago. I remember even having hair at the time. Certainly, I said, I can tell you are not from Texas. How can you tell, I asked, thinking she had detected some kind of accent from afar. You should know, she said, that Texas was part of the Confederacy, not the North, and that thousands of young men fought and died for Southern independence during the war. It was very much a part of our heritage. Well, she was exactly right. An estimated 70,000 young Texans marched off to war in 1861, 1862. Some invaded New Mexico territory, others fought and died with General Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia in the east, and thousands were captured at Vicksburg. Thousands of others died on battlefields thousands of miles from their families and their homes. But what she did not know, however, was that many Texans, and I think many Texans do not even know this today, is that almost 1,000 Tejanos and Mexicanos fought in the Civil War for the Union right here in South Texas. They enlisted in 1863 and early 1864, mostly at Brownsville and in the lower Rio Grande Valley. Eventually they came to be commanded by Colonel John L. Haynes, a loyal Union supporter from Rio Grande City. He was one of the few Anglos in Texas who understood and had sympathized with Juan Fortina back in 1859. People frequently ask, what was the Union Army doing in Texas? A number of leading Texas Unionists, including Haynes and the district judge from South Texas, a most honorable man, although he came to be hated during Reconstruction, named Edmund J. Davis. Davis, along with Haynes and Alexander Hamilton, a congressman from Austin, had gone to Washington to see Abraham Lincoln to encourage a Union invasion of Texas. Both Hamilton and Davis, being on the winning side in the war, would go on to become governor of the state after the war. So what did these gentlemen from Texas tell the president? Number one, they argued that an occupation of the Rio Grande frontier would help to strangle Texas economically and help win the war. Remember, there was an immense cotton trade in Texas at the time. People on the river called this period of history the Cotton Times and never really referred to it as the Civil War. Union strategists even considered occupying the entire Rio Grande frontier all the way beyond Eagle Pass, and even linking up with Union forces that had driven the Texans out of New Mexico and were in control of the area west of the Pecos. A footnote to all of this is that a Union army on the Rio Grande would be in a much better position to supply Benito Juarez and the liberals in Mexico with arms. Lincoln clearly sympathized with Juarez and the cause of the liberals and viewed the French imperialists as being in violation of the Monroe Doctrine. Lincoln also wanted to offer a haven for Texas Unionists who were being severely persecuted in the state, especially the German Texans in the Hill Country, some of whom were being brutalized, arrested, and even hanged. I was going through a San Antonio newspaper a few days ago and came across just a small article, no more than 50 words, that said the sheriff of Kerr County, this is in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, had been brought into San Antonio by Confederate forces in chains. Remember also that a number of German Texans and even a man named Pablo Diaz, while on their way to Mexico, were massacred on the West Fork of the Nueces by Confederate forces in August 1862. I think the Union Army was also hoping to recruit several thousand Unionists into the Army, many who had fled the state and are already enlisting in the Union Army in New Orleans, which was in Union hands by this time. But let's cut to the great drama of the time. They came out of the gray dawn. They came out of the gray dawn from New Orleans at all. 6,998 men came through a terrible storm in 26 ships. On November the 2nd, 1863, they went ashore and raised the Stars and Stripes on Brazos Island. 3 days later, they crossed to the mainland and began marching on Brownsville. The commander of what came to be known as the Union Rio Grande Expedition wrote a very simple message to Abraham Lincoln, quote, "The flag of the Union floats over Texas today." By March 1864, after the Federals had occupied Brownsville and the Civil War had moved as far upriver as Laredo, where 200 Union soldiers, many of them Mexican Texans, attacked the small community hoping to destroy some 5,000 bales of cotton stacked in San Agustin Plaza, waiting to be crossed into Mexico. That is so much cotton that I originally thought that somebody had just added an extra 0 to 500. So I went back and looked at the original document, and that's what the document says, 5,000 bales of cotton. A bale of cotton would be about probably 5 feet high, 3 feet across, and weigh as much as 600-700 pounds. The men in blue were driven off by Colonel Santos Benavides and a small army of Confederates. In the months that followed, the Union Army was never quite able to cut the flow of cotton from Texas into Mexico, and the precious white fiber continued to flow across the river, especially at Laredo, and even more so at Eagle Pass. At the same time the Union forces were pushing up the Rio Grande, they were also penetrating deep into the Nueces Strip, that no man's land between the Rio Grande and the Nueces. Here, Union guerrillas were active, attacking cotton trains and even attacking and plundering the King Ranch in December of 1863. They probably would have killed Richard King had he been on the ranch at the time. King was making a fortune during the war, taking cotton across the river and even through the blockade, selling beef to the rebels, and steamboating on the Rio Grande using the Mexican flag. After the war, his application for amnesty makes for great fiction. It's almost as if he was not here. Many of the Tejano guerrillas operating in the Nueces Strip had undeniably ridden with Juan Cortina during the Cortina War in 1859-1860, in which Cortina had occupied the entire lower Rio Grande Valley, except for Port Isabella and Brazos Island. Cortina led one of the few armies that defeated the Texas Rangers in battle. In fact, he defeated the Rangers twice, even taking their cannon away from them. But came to be defeated himself by the U.S. Army and the Rangers in a bloody battle at Rio Grande City in December 1859. Attached to the 2nd Union Texas Cavalry, commanded by Colonel John Haynes, were at least 125 guerrillas led by Cecilio Valero and his son Juan. We know that the father was born in Mier, according to the historical record, and we know that Juan, the son, had been captured in Corpus Christi in March of 1864 and was forced to act as a guide by the Confederate forces as they moved south and east from San Antonio to drive the Federals out of the lower valley. The Valeros knew the brush country as few others did, and I have no doubt that many of the men they gathered around them, like Cortina, was fed up with the racism and the discrimination that existed in Texas at the time, especially in Corpus Christi, where the citizens were petrified by Juan Cortina. The legendary John S. Rip Ford, who commanded Confederate forces in South Texas, said Cecilio Valero, quote, was an active officer well acquainted with the country, and who was brave and vigilant. His men were equipped, we know, with Burnside carbines, revolvers, and sabers. We also know that the guerrillas were being supplied with gold coins, munitions, and clothing from the United States Navy that was anchored off of Padre Island. We need to remember at the time that the Union Army was in control of most of the islands on the Texas coast, including Padre, Mustang, and Matagorda, although they had lost Galveston in early January of 1863 back to the Confederacy. Moving south from San Antonio was a vanguard of the rebel army that called itself the Cavalry of the West, led by a 30-year-old Rhode Island-born Matthew Nolan, sheriff of Nueces County. Nolan was known in South Texas as, quote, the boy bugler of the Battle of Palo Alto, as a result of his gallantry during the war with Mexico from 1846 to 1848. After the war, he had joined the Texas Rangers and had ridden the Nueces Strip with the legendary Ford. At the beginning of the war in 1861, not long after Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, that initiated the war, Nolan had gone downriver from Laredo and massacred a small band of defiant Cortinistas in Rancho Clareño in Zapata County. In South Texas, the Cortina War seemed to kind of merge with the Civil War. The most serious guerrilla engagement in the Nueces Strip came on Sunday, March the 13th, 1864, at 7:30 in the morning at a place called Los Patricios, less than 4 miles from where we are today, when Nolan attacked a camp of the Valeros. While the guerrillas lay sleeping, Juan was said to have shouted out the warning to his father that the Confederates were approaching. In a furious fight that lasted more than 15 minutes in an oak thicket, much blood was shed. Nolan lost 3 of his men, and the Valeros were said to have lost at least 5 of their men. Numerous other soldiers were wounded, some of them seriously. Nolan said, quote, the Valeros charged and fought us most gallantly and could only be dispersed after a desperate fight at the cost of much blood. Unfortunately, we have only the Confederate version of what happened. The Confederates claimed they captured 31 horses, 42 saddles and bridles, 25 sabers, and 107 blankets. 5 months after the battle at Los Patricios, Nolan was re-elected sheriff of Nueces County and promoted to major in the Confederate Army. 5 months after that, 3 days before Christmas in 1864, Nolan was fatally wounded in a gun battle in Corpus Christi. There is less than objective historical marker to his memory at Bayside Cemetery in the city today. After the war in 1870, the governor of Texas, Edmund J. Davis, who had been the Union general during the war, awarded the heirs of the Valeros, who had returned to Mier after the war, a quarter section of land. A corrido recalling their gallantry at Los Patricios was part of the proud oral tradition of Tejanos as late as 1950. Thanks to Homero and another historical markers at the site today, recalling what happened there 160 years ago. Today we gather here on this beautiful day, thanks to Homero and many others, to honor the memory of those who fought and died at Los Patricios on that desperate day in 1864. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. I hope you all learned a little bit of a history there of the Battle of Los Patricios. Dr. Thompson has written probably, I don't know, at least 20 books, maybe more, of the Civil War and the participants, everybody from Juan Cortina to generals in the Union and Confederacy, Santos Benavides, the Confederate colonel from Laredo. If you all don't have any of his books, you all need to get them It was a really, really great meeting. I'm going to talk about how I discovered this battle site. One day, Dr. Thompson gave me a call, and he said, Homero, do you know where the battle took place of Los Patricios? I said, well, that's only just from what your account in the book, 50 miles southwest of Banquete. That's Banquete, Texas, east of Dallas. There is a historical marker north of Kingsville on Business 77. It says a little bit about the battle, mentions the battle on there. And I think the reason it's there is because Captain Matt Nolan's Confederate camp, they were based over there on San Fernando Creek. That's where they were based at before they came over here. So one day, I was at the courthouse in Alice doing some research, and I came across a map. And this is probably one of the earliest maps of this area. It dates from 1809. It's a Spanish colonial map, and it was these grantees that had come up from Mier to survey their lands, their land grants. And one of them, the land grant was called San Francisco. And the grantee was Juan Manuel de la Garza Falcón. But in the map, it's got two landmarks. And they're referenced as La Mota, Los Patricios, and Ramadero, Los Patricios. So I called Dr. Thompson. I said, I think I found Los Patricios on paper. And he agreed with me. And so those two landmarks were actually on the northeast corner of the land grant, which is about, I don't know, 12, 14 miles northwest of here. And that's when I started asking area ranchers in that area if they had ever found any artifacts. Well, no luck. And then one day I was at the Oasis restaurant, and Mr. Bill Spear, local farmer from here, lived about 5 miles west of here, this farm. And I asked him, Bill, you ever found any artifacts in your ranch? And he said, oh yeah, back in 1953, I found some bullets. Really? You still have them? He said, yes. Well, can I see them? And he went home and brought them, and he had them in a shoebox. And sure enough, there were Civil War era bullets. And today, his son is here, Woody, from Houston, and he's back there, and he has those bullets. So later on, y'all can, he's going to bring them up here, y'all can see them. And also, a neighbor across the street from the Spear place, Mrs. Anthony Hunter, I asked her, and she told me her husband had also found 3 bullets along the creek. So the creek we referenced to the Los Olmos Creek, and Los Olmos Creek, you know, starts out there in north central Duval County and runs through here, through the Santa Cruz crossing, and then here about 5 miles west of Premont, it crosses Farm Market Road 716. It goes south of Premont, southwest of Premont, and then it empties out into Baffin Bay. It's a big creek, probably the biggest creek between here and the Rio Grande. So that's what I told Dr. Thompson. But I think now we know more or less where the site is because of these artifacts. You know, bullets were found there. And then another family, well, after the battle, you know, Captain Matt Nolan took his Confederate force back to their camp on the San Fernando Creek, and Captain Valerio took his group, just headed west. And about, probably about another 5 or 6 miles west of where the battle site is the science farm. And two brothers, Joely and Nancy Carrales, they're back there. That was their grandfather's ranch, and I guess when they were kids out there in the field, they found a Union belt buckle, and it's on display over here. It could have been, we don't know for a fact if it's that or not, but very well could be, as Valerio went west, and that could have been a place where they stopped to camp out. So I definitely think we found the actual site with these artifacts, and then of course documented on the map. And I did apply for a historical marker several years back, and I was surprised that the Historical Commission declined it. So I'm going to try again. We'll do, and hopefully we'll get a state historical marker out there. Now, our next speaker is going to talk about one of the participants of the battle. His name was Julian Garza. He was a Union soldier under Valerio. And Marcos Flores was going to talk to you all about him. Give Marcos a welcome.
And a proper introduction for Mr. Homero Vera. Thank you, Mr. Vera.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Marcos Flores. I'm thankful to be here. I could hear Jerry Thompson and Homero Vera speak all day long. I used to read their journals and books early on, and it's really, I really appreciate it because they brought South Texas to life and the contributions that South Texas had on this great American United States history that we have. I have the privilege to speak to you today about Julian Garza. He was a private in the Battle of Los Patricios. I'm going to go ahead and read you his description. It's a very interesting story. I actually found out about Julian. I got in touch with the Troop 6, the Sepulvedas, and they do reenactments over there at Old Bayview Cemetery. And I was doing my research there, and I found out that there was a soldier by the name of Julian Garza that was in the 2nd Regiment Texas Cavalry. And I said, man, I know a little bit of that history. And so I was able to portray him this past November. And if you ever have a chance to go out there, there's cannon, they shoot cannons, there's Confederates, there's Buffalo Soldiers, all sorts of reenactors, but it's a great scene. Well, I learned about Julian, and I found out that his story is very interesting. This kind of puts a name and a face to the battle, you know. And so I'll go ahead and read you a little bit of his history. The military records of Julian Garza indicate that he was born in Mexico in 1843. He enlisted in the Army of the United States in Brownsville on December 18, 1863, under Colonel Haynes, 2nd Regiment. Julian signed up for 3 years. At the time of his enlistment, he was described as having black eyes, black hair, and his height was about 5'8". He listed his occupation as a ranchero. For the next months, from January to April of 1864, and this is important because he was in the battle here in March. He was absent on detached service, which began in January 16th of 1864. His military records indicate that he served in Company D of the 2nd Regiment, and then Company M of the 1st Texas Volunteer Cavalry, and then was mustered out of service in San Antonio in 1865. Now, what happened to the 2nd Regiment is they ended up going to Louisiana and then merging with the 1st Texas Cavalry. Okay, so when they came back to Texas, he was part of the 1st Texas Cavalry. After his service, Julian reports he worked as a vaquero for Mr. Eugenio Scott from Mission Refugio County, and then he worked for Manuel Ramirez at La Boveda in Oasis County, and for 15 years for Mr. Moss in Refugio. Now this is where the story gets interesting. Julian was injured in the battle. He took a bullet to his arm and was also had some facial lacerations as well. So at this time in 1888, he's about 44 years old now. He applied for a disability pension because he had been working as a vaquero. I guess he wasn't able to do everything he could. So in 1888, at the age of 44, Julian applied for a disability pension. He appeared in Brownsville and reported that he was a resident of Brownsville and was employed as a vaquero. He reported a disability resulting from a wound he received while in service. He alleged that he was wounded by a shot in the right arm near the elbow that interfered with his ability to perform manual labor. In his application, Julian reported that he received a wound during the skirmish of San Patricio, Texas, and in May of 1864, he reported that he was treated by the regimental surgeon at the hospital in Brownsville. So he was wounded in March, and by May, he ended up being in Brownsville. In the application, he also stated that he stayed with the regiment and was discharged honorably in June of 1865 in San Antonio. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. In his first attempt at the application, the doctor who examined him did acknowledge that Julian had been sick and that he had the bridge of his nose had been destroyed. But he did not find the elbow to be incapacitated, nor was it clear that the wound was caused by a gunshot. The application was denied. That was in 1988. In 1989, he tried again. In his second attempt to renew the application, the following year in 1889, he maintained that he served with Company M of the 1st Texas Cavalry and was honorably discharged in San Antonio on October 31st, 1865. Witnesses testifying for him at the time were Alexander Rose and Martin Hinojosa. He was denied again. Julian was still seeking the disability pension and continued applying for his third time. In his third attempt in late April 1890, this is the third year in 1890, this time the doctor in corpus attested that Julian had been shot in the arm and such that the right arm was atrophied and disabled. A second doctor from Corpus also testified that the right arm was atrophied and contracted because of a gunshot wound. Additionally, this is the third application, two comrades, Cecilio Buenteo and Pedro Rodriguez of Corpus Christi, also testified on behalf of Julian regarding his service. They had testified that and this is where there's actual testimony for the battle. They testified that between Los Olmos and Santa Gertrudis, Company M had been attacked by Captain Nolan, and that during the fighting, Julian had been wounded both in the face and in the arm, where the ball was lodged near his elbow. At the time, Julian was unhorsed. Okay, he lost his horse in the battle, and had to travel on foot to Brownsville to get treatment, which was so late that his arm had been badly swollen. So the battle happened in March, and he ended up in May in Brownsville on foot. Other comrades, Eugenio Guzman and Pedro Gomez, testified that Julian was one out of 30 men under the command of Captain Cecilio Valerio, who was sent to procure horses to mount the regiment and riding his own horse. He was riding his own horse, and who he lost during the battle. So after the third attempt in April of 1890, this is 3 years, due to some discrepancies from the dates and correspondence, for example, they said that when they looked at the muster out rolls in San Antonio that he wasn't present there. So it was denied again. Consequently, the United States government wanted more evidence. Okay, so 3 years later, they were sending letters to him, but they were getting returned. Because unfortunately, a month after he applied for his third pension, he had passed away. As late as 1893, 3 years later, officials in Washington, D.C. requested that Julian report for further medical exam at Fort Brown. However, his file shows that the final letters were returned unclaimed. So, unfortunately, a month after the third attempt, in April of 1890, where doctors and witnesses verified his story, Julian passed away a month later on May 7th, 1890. He is buried at Old Bayview Cemetery with military honors. His tombstone simply reads, Julian Garza, Company M, 1st Texas Cavalry. And consequently, Matt Nolan is also buried there too. So all of these great leaders in our area were fighting for what they believed in, and it shows how South Texas was a contributing part in our great American history. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos. Another unknown story that nobody knew about Julian Garza. On Cecilio Valerio, okay, we have a lot of descendants here today. Can you all, if you're a descendant of Cecilio Valerio, can you raise your hand? Let's give them a round of applause. That's great that you all came out here to honor your ancestor. Now, I had contacted a family member to kind of give like a bio of him, and I talked to him a couple of nights ago, and he couldn't make it out of Austin. He got ill, and I might be preaching to the choir, but I just know very little bit about him. This is not the military stuff. This is his personal life. I know he was born in Mier, and Cecilio was a Mustanger. He would capture wild Mustangs and sell them to area ranchers. And I know when I was doing research back in the 1990s in the courthouse in Corpus, I came across a deed, and Cecilio Valerio owned property on the bluff in Corpus Christi, the only Mexican who actually owned property on the bluff in the city of Corpus Christi. This is like 1854. And then actually, before he got those state patents out there in Duval County, he was ranching at the Rancho Petronila. And I found he was married to, his first wife was Maria Gertrudis Trevino de la Garza. And he had 6 children with her that I found. Maria Pánfila, Pedro, Felipe, Juan, and Juan was the one who was with him at the battle, and Leonardo. And there might be, if you all descendants know of any others, please. Oh, and Maria Antonia. Now, Cecilio, I found he married. He was widowed, so he married a widow by the name of Maria de Jesus Garcia in Camargo on March the 31st, 1873. I said, man, he was an old man getting married. I said, could it possibly be him? Well, because these websites, the family search I use, they make errors. People change stuff around. But I actually found the actual document for the civil records, and sure enough, it is Cecilio. He was 76 years old, so that makes him born in 1797. And it even listed his father and mother. His father was Gabriel Valerio. I hope if you all Valerio families know that for a fact. That's what the document says. And his mother was Maria Jesus Garcia Olivares. And his wife, Maria de Jesus, was actually 79 years old. So she was 3 years older than him. So could it have been that, they were boyfriend and girlfriend in their younger days and got together when they were old? Makes it for a good love story, right? But he didn't live much longer after that. I couldn't find his death record. But Cecilio was a fairly wealthy man. He is listed in the census of 1870 in Duval County. He's 82 years old, and he's a stock raiser. And his personal wealth was a little over $4,000. So that's what I have on Cecilio. And today, Roseanne, tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Mr. Vera, for inviting us to this really great event. We're very happy to be here. We do have a table over here that has our Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail project. A lot of you have the goodie bags that we have. We're now officially out of the goodie bags, but we do still have some maps to give out. And this battle at Los Patricios is on our map. At this time, I'd like to bring up and introduce you to Dr. Russell Skowronek and Dr. Christopher Miller, who are history professors at UTRGV and are founding directors of the CHAPS program at UTRGV. And I would like to ask them to tell you how we came up with this idea for this wonderful project, the Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail.
Thank you, Roseanne. I'm Russ Skowronek. Hi, Chris Miller. First thing before we even start, since you picked up the bag, go in the bag and put the pin on. You don't get something for free. Put the pin on. All right. Now that I've spoken like a professor, there will be a test, and it will be administered by Dr. Thompson. It will be administered about Valerio and about Julian Garza, so no one leaves without their blue book, okay? We want to, just for a moment, talk about how things happen. And we've talked today about incidents that happened 160 years ago. Many of you are descendants of those people who were intimately involved with what happened 160 years ago. But we can all attest that with time, memories fade. What is important to one generation is not important to another. Towns can disappear, people move away, things change. Some of us are old enough here to remember the centennial of the Civil War. Some of us remember the last veterans of the Civil War's death, or remember them in Veterans Day parades from the 1940s and 1930s and beyond. Time changes and time becomes fleeting. So how do you come up with a Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail? You have two friends sitting in an office, and I only wish I could say we had cocktails in our hand and a cigar, but it wasn't that sexy. What it turned into was the two of us talking about friends coming down to visit and say, you have some spectacular things down here, dating back to the time of the American Civil War and beyond. And everyone looks at each other and says, we do? And what, of course, this does for us is it makes us ask the question why, a decade ago, when we were looking at the sesquicentennial of the Civil War and we were talking, we said, why is it that you can go to any state from Illinois and Maryland down to the Gulf Coast and they all have Civil War trails? And certainly Texas has lots of trails, and we have some Civil War places, but no one actually looked at the idea of the issue of the Civil War in one area. And even though we are not Civil War historians, as Jerry will stand up and say, that's right, they don't know anything. Even though we were not that, we could, of course, remember, well, maybe not the Civil War, but the centennial. And we started naming off places all the way from Brownsville to Laredo. And then what do? You get a willing graduate student. And you hand them enough money for gas to drive up and down, talk to people, and get ideas together. And what ended up happening was, should I shut up?
No. Keep going.
Well, I'll keep it short. But in the spring of 2014, we got together with folks all the way, including Jerry, from Laredo to Brownsville, and we brought in some experts from Kentucky and West Virginia and Kansas. And we threw the idea out about a Civil War trail. And these were all people from museums, people like yourselves with relatives up and down the valley. And we fed them lunch. You know, lunch gets people in the door. You notice how that works? We give you a goodie bag, so wear your pin. Lunch gets people in the door. And we threw the idea out, and a few people said, well, gee, there was something that we did 20 years earlier called Los Caminos del Rio, and there isn't a lot to show off for it. How is this different? And we said, well, what's different is this is not the 500-pound gorilla from the university. This is people working as communities. And they said, and then of course comes the next part, they all began looking at their shoes because they thought we wanted this. And if anyone knows anything about historic preservation and museums, what don't they have? They have no money. And we said, we don't want your money. We'll find money. And trust me, we pick it up, we dance for nickels. But what we want from you is help us create the map. Then they looked at their shoes again and going, oh my God, I have to write a term paper. I said, no, we don't want a stinking term paper. We want one page. And everyone goes, one page, there has to be a catch. And we said, yeah, tell us why it's important and where it's located so we can put it on a map. That's all we asked.
And is there a bathroom there?
And, and by God, by August, we had over 50 sites reported to us. We worked on it heavily, had everything created into the map that's in your bag that you have right now, podcasts, everything in Spanish and English. And we had an inaugural snipping of the ribbon in 2015, so the 150th anniversary of the end of the war, followed by 4 years later, in 2019, the traveling exhibit that has been seen by over 75,000 people. Would have seen more because of COVID, but it's still moving. And you'll hear more about it from Roseanne. We've published books that we've brought with it. We've kept this going, and most of all, and this is the most important part, I see some of the youngsters out there going, how long is this gassy old professor going to speak? What we did was we worked with the people who matter, K through 12 teachers, and developed lesson plans that are aligned with the TEKS so that these stories about why this region was important in American history and in the American Civil War is not forgotten for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. If we don't do it, there's no point. And so we feel very proud about what we've created, and we're very honored to be part of this today, have made so many friends up and down the valley. Chris, do you want to say the last few words?
I just want to point out, because of who's in the audience, one of the key points of this entire project, and one of the points of pride of this project, is that it was written by the community. It wasn't written by us. We went to the community and said, you tell us your story, and we'll make sure that other people hear it. And that's how this project came together. So when you open that map and you look at what's in there, all of that was contributed by people like you. And that's something that we're very, very proud of. And we're very happy to be the ones to deliver it to the next generation.
And one last thing, we'll see your motor skills. Who can remember how to fold a map?
So again, thank you, Homero, for bringing us here. We just want to let you know that in your goodie bags you have a map. On the map is a QR code that can take you right to our bilingual website. We also have a bilingual mobile web where you can listen to audio podcasts about all the different sites on our trail. And we spent some time back in 2018 developing a traveling museum exhibit and a documentary film, or several documentary films. And we want to let you know that, like Dr. Skronik said, over 75,000 people have visited our traveling museum exhibit. Right now it's standing in Harlingen at the Harlingen Arts and Heritage Museum. But on April 5th, I know Harlingen's a little far for you guys, but on April 5th, we will be installing the exhibit up in Cuero at their Heritage Museum, in case you guys are more apt to go north. And so on April 5th, we'll install it there, and on April 6th, we'll give a public lecture and do a book signing. So to bring this information to the community. So you're welcome to come up to visit us at our table. Many of you already have the goodie bags. We have a couple more maps that we can give out, and we have some of the books for sale of the products that we have developed for the community. So thanks again for having us. And if anybody in here works with a museum and wants the exhibit in the future, please let us know. We'll be happy to talk with you about that. Okay?
Thank you all so much for coming up here and bring you all the exhibit. If you all haven't seen that exhibit, it's really awesome. Back in, I think it was January, towards the end of January, early part of February, I was invited to a hunting camp north of here for dinner. And I was telling my friends there about this battle with Patricios. And they were kind of, listening a little bit. But there was a little boy there, I say little boy, a young man, he's a sixth grader, and he was all ears. He really wanted to know everything about it, ask me questions. And afterward he says, I can make a little maquette display of the battle with my Legos. Really? Yeah. Well, I said, okay. Well, the next day, I think it was the next night, his mother, Amber, who's here, sent me a photo of it that he'd done like in a day. And it's on display over here on this table. So y'all get a chance to go by there just to see that. I want to thank the Nueces Calvary Scout Living History Group. Y'all can go up there and mingle and check out the Civil War era rifles and memorabilia they have there. They're also going to have a cannon. They're going to shoot some volleys here in a little while. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this event. Tony Alanis, Sebastian Vela, Carlos and Terry Garza, Willie and Anita Vela, Richard and Rosita Stillman, and an anonymous donor. They contribute money to have this event. Also, the Chamber of Commerce has their annual jumbo brisket combo sale going on over there in that tent. For $10, you get a big old jumbo brisket with chips and a drink. That's a bargain. It's almost like a half a pound of meat. Really, really good. I think that concludes our program today. Just to hope you all stick around and mingle and talk to your friends. I want to mention, I don't even know the name of the word, for people that are over 90 years old. We have 3 persons here that I know for a fact that are over 90. Miss Lidia Canales from Benavides is always in all these historical events. She was the chair of the Duval County Historical Commission for like over 30 years. Miss Elodia Sainz from La Rosita. Yes, Miss Sainz. I met her like back in the 1990s. Wonderful lady, former school teacher. She showed me, very proud of her ancestor, Cecilia Valerio, and gave me a tour of the house and everything there at Rosita. And last but not least, we have a World War II veteran in the crowd here, Mr. Noé Mendez. Or Mr. Noé Mendez. Mr. Mendez will be 99 in next month. Yeah. And please, if you all would register your name on our sign-in sheet here, and also, like I said, the chamber has that brisket sale. I want to promote our businesses here in downtown area. If the West Mall Market there has really, really good beef. They have really good meat. The bank, we have a Blue Star coffee shop, better Starbucks. Y'all want a good jolt of Java, go out there. And then of course, we have the restaurants. We have the Oasis, Taqueria, Dairy Queen. So we try to promote all our businesses here. As you know, Premont got bypassed last year, so we don't have all the heavy traffic, all the 18-wheelers going through here anymore. On occasion they do go by, but not like they used to. But I thank everybody for coming out here, supporting this. If you all want to go by Woody, if you could bring out those bullets and put them on display there so people can see the actual artifacts that were found at the site about 5 miles west of here. Like I said, hopefully you got a historical marker put out there. I know it takes a long time to do a marker, on average about 3 years, but we'll get it done. And if you all enjoyed this, maybe we can do this as an annual thing. I know a lot of Valerio family members here. It's like a little family reunion here. So thank you all. God bless everybody. You all have a safe trip home.